Hello, so welcome back to this channel. Okay, so because today is Thursday, I was actually thinking about the first app I did, the first app I ever made when I started out as an app developer. I still remember exactly how shabby looking it was. So this actually inspired me to make this tutorial. So today we are going to be building our first iOS application using Xamarin.iOS. So on our screen you can see the app that we're going to have at the end of the day. So the app is very simple, straightforward and very basic. So I'm going to try to show us as much as possible in very few minutes. So we are going to be going over what I call the basics of iOS development in a very short time, in less than 15 minutes. So without wasting any single minute, let's get right into it. So if you want to start making iOS apps using Xamarin.iOS, the first thing you need to have will be a Mac computer. So I have a Mac computer here. So this is what I'm using to record this video. So if you don't have a Mac computer, you kind of need a friend that has a Mac computer, because you can actually use your Visual Studio on Windows to also develop iOS applications, but you need a Mac close to you to be able to connect using a Mac agent. We'll get to that point later on. Now if you have a Mac computer, the next thing you need to do will be to install Xcode. So you can easily install Xcode by going to the App Store, that's the default App Store you have on your Mac computer. So when you get to the App Store, you can easily go ahead and search for Xcode. So it's a very popular app. So I already have Xcode installed on my computer, so I can just go ahead and open it. So before you can start making iOS apps, you will need to install Xcode. And when you install Xcode, you need to open it first of all, so that all the dependencies will be properly installed. And after you successfully have installed Xcode, the next thing you need to do will be to go to your browser. You need to go to your browser and search for Visual Studio for Mac. So if you search for Visual Studio for Mac, it's going to bring you to this page. So this is where you can install Visual Studio for Mac, which will allow you to start making iOS app using Xamarin. So the Xamarin package comes by default, so you don't need to worry yourself. All you just need to do is to go ahead and click on download Visual Studio for Mac. So it will download the installer. So the installer is going to walk you through the installation. You literally won't have any issues at all. You just need to click on install and everything will be automatically done for you. So I give the Xamarin guys kudos here. So after that, the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and launch Visual Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and launch an instance of Visual Studio for Mac, which is what we are going to be using to make our iOS app. So this is what the Visual Studio for Mac looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new project. Because you're just using your Visual Studio for Mac for the first time, so you probably need to select the iOS template and select single view application and click on next. So this is the time you go ahead and provide the name of your app, which we can call my first app. Alright, so the next thing you need to set will be your organization identifier. So my organization is Ufinix, so I have com.ufinix. With the app name combined to it, we will now have a bundle identifier. Now the next thing you need to do will be to select the devices that you want your app to run on. If you want your app to run on iPad, you check this, and you want it to run on iPhone, you check this as well. So we're only interested in iPhone, so I'm going to go ahead and uncheck iPad. So the next thing we need to do will be to select a target framework. So the target SDK is iOS 13.1, which is kind of the latest as at when this video was recorded. So if I select 13.1, it means that only iPhones that are running on iOS 13.1 will be able to run our app. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce the development target to 12.4, which accommodates iPhone 6 and all of those other phones. So I'm going to go ahead and click on next. So everything seems well in order, so I'm going to go ahead and click on create. And bam! So this is what we have. Our Xamarin.iOS project has now been created for us. So the first thing we need to do will be to go ahead and open our Storyboard designer. So the Storyboard designer helps us to design the user interface of our application. So with the Storyboard designer, we can be able to define how we want our app to look. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. So if you use your two fingers on your mouse, you'll be able to zoom in and out of this layout. And also you can also use this to zoom in and out. Alright, so this seems good. So like I already mentioned, the Storyboard Designer is what helps us to design the interface of our app. So currently you can see that we have one page already added for us. So what happens here is that we can go ahead and start adding different elements to this page. And when we run our app, whatever that we have added to this page is what is going to display on our app. So what we see here on the screen is what we call a view controller. So there are two sides to a view controller. The first side is the user interface side, which is what we see here, which will allow us to be able to add our buttons, our text inputs, and other things like that. And the other side is the coding part of it, which is where we write codes that controls every other thing that we see on the user interface. So without wasting any further time, we're going to go ahead and start designing our user interface. So as you can see, this is what we want to have at the end of the day. So to be able to have this, the first thing we need to do will be to go ahead and add a label. So I'm going to go to the toolbox. So the toolbox is the panel that contains all the elements that we're going to be using to design our user interface. So as you can see, there is a whole lot of elements here that you can choose from. So the one that we are interested in is the label. So I'm going to go ahead and drag the label. It's just drag and drop and put it somewhere here. Okay, so now that we have the label, I can go ahead and increase the size by dragging this point to the left and dragging this to the right. So now that I've increased the size, the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and edit the properties of this label. So every single element on the user interface or on the view controller has other properties associated to it. So we can go ahead and make edits to those properties. So I can go into the property window, which will reveal all the properties associated with the label. So I'm going to go ahead and change the content of the label to 11th October 2019. So here I'm going to go ahead and set the alignment because I want this to be always in the middle, the text to always be in the middle. And the next thing I want to do will be to increase the font size to 24, and I'm going to change this to heavy. So this will do for the label. Now the next thing I want to do will be to go ahead and change the background of this layout. So the white is quite very boring, so I'm going to set it to a different color entirely. So here in the property window, I'll go and find the background and set the background to a different color. So you can choose any of the colors here. You can go to others and you can now have a ton of other colors revealed to you. So I think this color is just okay. Alright, so now that we have that, the next thing I want to do will be to change the color of my label to white so that it will be very visible. Alright, now the next thing I need to do will be to go ahead and add other labels. I need to add this label and this label and this button. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, which is more like the same thing we just did. So I'm going to go to the toolbox and drag a label and put it somewhere here. And I'm going to increase the size. Now the next thing I need to do will be to go ahead and add some text to it. Alright, so I'm going to go to the properties and I'm going to change the text content. So I'm going to have Superman didn't always fly. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and set some of the properties. I want this to always be in the middle. So I don't want the title to always be on a straight line. I want it to be able to overflow. Okay, so when I set the lines to 0, it means that we want the content of this label to be able to overflow. So I'm going to drag this down a little bit so you can see the content has now overflowed. So I'm going to drag this up a little bit and I'm going to change the font. I'm going to increase the font size. 18 is okay. So I'm going to change the font size to semi-bold, which is fine. Alright, I also need to change the default color to white. Okay, now the next thing we need to do will be to add another label. This time around is going to contain the text that we're going to be seeing on our screen. So I'm going to go to our toolbox and drag a label and drop it here. Alright, so this time around I need to increase the size of the label so that it can contain more text. Okay, so this is good. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and bring in the text that we want to display in this label. So this is the website I'm going to be getting my content from. So I'm going to add a link in the video description so you can go there and copy your text. So the first is Superman didn't always fly. I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this. So we're going to return back to Visual Studio. Now we're going to go into the label text and we're going to paste this here. Now the next thing we need to do will be to change the lines to 0. Boom. So as you can see, this is now overflowing and every other thing is showing. Now the next thing we also need to do is to centralize the text. Alright. And we need to change the color of the text to white. And bam. Okay, so I think the background is a little bit shouting. It's not allowing the text to show properly. So we're going to go ahead and make it darker. Alright. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and add a button. So I'm going to go to the toolbox and drag a button and put it here. So I'm going to go ahead and increase the size and increase the size. So the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and change the background of the button. So we're going to select background here and set it to white. And we're going to change the text color, which is this. I'm going to set it to black, which is DateTest. Alright, now the next thing we need to do will be to increase the size of the button. We need to increase the size a little bit. Okay, I'm going to ensure that this is at the center. So whenever we see the tiny blue lines, we now know that our button is centralized. Okay, the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and change the text content. I'm going to change this to next, and we're going to make the font to be bold. The other thing we need to do will be to set the corner radius. We want the buttons to have rounded edges, so I'm going to go ahead and add corner radius of say 3. So this is more like our first iOS design. So let's go ahead and see it on a simulator. So I'm going to go ahead and run this on a simulator. Okay, so our app is installing, and bam, so we have our app. So as you can see, designing an iOS app can really be very easy and straightforward. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and add some customizations or more functionality to our app. First, we want a different background, a background that is much more inspiring. So we're going to be using an image for the background, and also we want the actual date of the day to be displaying on this label. So this is what we're going to be doing next. So I'm going to go ahead and stop testing our app. I'm going to go ahead and stop running the app. Alright, now the next thing we need to do will be to go ahead and import the image that we want to be using as the background. So the image that we're going to be using as our background has been designed by me. So I'm going to add the link where you can download the image in the description below. So you can simply click on the link to get the background. So I'm going to go ahead and click on our Solution Explorer. So the Solution Explorer is responsible for displaying all the files and folder structure associated with your project. So these are my folder structure for this particular project. So what I'm going to do will be to add this image into the resource folder. So the resource folder is responsible for holding all your assets and resources, things like images, MP3 files, stuffs like that. You can add them in the resource folder. So I'm going to go ahead and add the image. The image is an already existing file, so I'm going to click on Add Files. So this is the image that we are interested in, so I'm going to go ahead and add it. Okay, so the image has been added. Now the next thing we need to do will be to go to our toolbox and drag an image view. So to find an image view, I can easily go ahead and use the search box and search image view. Alright, so I'm going to drag this image view to the view controller. Now the next thing we need to do will be to expand the image view. We need to expand it to cover up the entire space. Cover up the entire space. Alright, so now that we've successfully covered the entire space, the next thing we need to do will be to set the image that we just imported as the image to be displayed in the image view. So we're going to go to Properties, and we're going to go to the image property of this particular image view. So I'm going to drop this down. We're going to see background. So I'm going to select background. So now that we've selected backgrounds, as you can see, every other thing on the page is hidden, so we can't see them, which is not exactly what we want to happen. So to fix this, I'm going to go ahead and double click on the image view, and I'm going to click on arrange, and I'm going to click on send to back. Alright, so when we click on send to back, as you can see, the image automatically became the background of our entire design, which is exactly what we have in mind. So we are almost getting to that point. So our app is about to look exactly the way we want it to look. Now the next thing we want to do will be to display today's date on this particular label. So because the date will always be changing, we can't always be having 11th of October 2019 on our app. So we want it to be changing. So what I'm going to do will be to go to the properties of this label. The first thing we need to do will be to give our label a name, a unique name, right? So every single element on this particular design that we probably might want to modify or access from our code, we must have to give it a name. So we need to give our label a unique name that we can always be using to identify it when we are writing the code. So I can easily call this date test or date label, whichever goes well for you. So I'm going to call it date test. Now the next thing we need to do will be to navigate to the code part of our app. So like I already explained, this is a view controller and this is the design part of the view controller. Now the view controller also has a code part of it, which is where we are going to be going to right away. So if you go to your solution file, you see that we have a file called viewcontroller.cs. This is actually the file that is responsible for everything that we see here on the design. So to also give it more context, we can go ahead and rename our view controller to really explain what we have here. So we can call it main page view controller, or we can call it date view controller, or whatsoever that makes sense to us. So I'm going to click on this ending part of the design, so which means that we are selecting the entire view controller. So in the property, I'm going to change the name of the view controller to first view controller. This will actually help us to give it more context. So if we intend to have more than one view controller, it wouldn't have any confusion at all. So because we've changed the name of this view controller, if we go to our Solution Explorer, we will see a new file has been generated for us, view controller. It means that this file is no longer needed. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Alright, now to navigate to the code part of things, I'm going to go ahead and double click on first view controller. Alright, so as you can see, this is the content of the file. It is still very empty. Now, the first thing we need to do whenever we open view controller class or the view controller file of our main page or our design, so the first thing we need to do will be to go ahead and say override view did load. Okay, so immediately our views have just completely loaded. This method will execute. So if there are probably things that we want to achieve as our app is starting, this is just the best place to do it. For instance, we want to display today's date. This is just the best place to do it. So what we want to do here will be to go ahead and display today's date on our date test. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and say date test. Alright, so this is not showing up. So I need to go back to our storyboard file and confirm that we named this label appropriately. The test. Right. Okay, so this is not showing up. So what we can do is to go ahead and build our project. So to ensure that everything is in order. Alright, so build is successful. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and rename this to datetime test. Okay, so we're going to go back to our first view controller. So I'm going to have datetime test. So as you can see, our label is showing up here. So I'm going to have datetime test.test. So the next thing we need to do will be to retrieve today's date. So how to retrieve today's date is very straightforward. So I'm going to have datetime.now. So this will give us the current date and time. So we can have datetime now dot to short date string. So this will go ahead and retrieve today's date for us. So to confirm that all of this works, I'm going to go ahead and run our app again so that we can see the appropriate date display on our app. Alright, so you can see today's date is showing, but there are other things that are not just so cool with our app. For instance, the image didn't cover the entire screen, and we don't want our date to be displaying like this, so we need to kind of format it. So let's go ahead and fix all of these issues. So I'm going to return to our main storyboard. I'm going to click on the image view. Alright, so this is the image view. So I'm going to go to the content mode and set it to scale to fill, so it will be able to cover the entire space. And another thing that we want to do will be to go to layouts. Alright, so this definition here is responsible for auto-sizing your elements. So we know that there are different screen sizes of iPhones. So you have to kind of provide some layout guide to ensure that most of your UI elements will be able to fit in on all screen sizes. So what we want to do here is that we want our image view to cover all the areas of different sizes of iPhone. We want it to just cover the entire screen. So that's why I went ahead to select all of this. Now to confirm that this works, I'm going to go ahead and run the app again. Boom. So as you can see, our layout guide is very proper now, and you can see that the image view covered the entire screen. Now the next thing that we need to do will be to go ahead and format our date. So to do that, I need to go back to our first view controller. So instead of having datetime.to short date string, I'm going to go ahead and format this. So I'm going to have datetime.now.to string, and I'm going to pass it a format. So the format of interest is ddmmm. So having 4 M's, we'll go ahead and write the month in full. So instead of having OCT, we're going to have October in full, and this I'm going to have YYY. So this is the format of interest, and bam, so we have that. So to confirm that this works, let's go ahead and run the app. Okay, so as you can see, we now have 31st October 2019. So like I already mentioned, I want to be able to show you as much as possible in your first iOS app. So what I'm going to do will be to show you how to change the status bar to white, because it's currently not white. And also I will be able to show you how to add some commands to when we click on this button. So currently this button doesn't do anything, so we need to make it to be able to do something, and that will be all. So let's start with the button first of all. So because we want to start writing commands behind the button, the first thing we need to do will be to give our button a name. So I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call it next button. Alright, so now we need to go to our first view controller. In the view.load method, I'm going to have next button dot touch up inside. So the touch up inside is an event that is responsible for notifying our application that a user clicked on the button. So we're going to go ahead and add this as an event. So what this means is that whatever code we write in this code block will be executed when we click on the next button. So here I'm going to go ahead and change the title of the next button. So I'm going to have next button.set title. So what do we want to display on the title? I'm going to say I am clicked. So it will really be nice if we can be able to tell the user the number of times we've clicked. So to do that, I'm going to define a new integer variable. So I'm going to call this counter. Alright, so counter will be equal to 0. So we need to define this as a global variable. And whenever we click the button, we're going to have counter plus plus. And here we're going to use string interpolation. We're going to have counter. Alright, so this is what we want to have. So what we're going to have is that, let's say the button was clicked 4 times, so we're going to have clicked 4 times. Alright, and finally we're going to set the state of the button. So we're going to set it as normal. So this is basically all that we need to do to start showing something on our button. Now the next thing we want to do will be to change the color of our status bar to be white. So to do that, we need to first of all go to our Solution Explorer. So we're going to open this info.plist, and we're going to go to source, and here we're going to add a new entry. So under the custom property, we're going to drop this down and we're going to select view controller base status bar appearance, and at this particular point we need to change this from yes to no. Alright, so when we set this to no, we're going to return back to our first view controller. Immediately after the base view did load method, we're going to go ahead and write this line of code. I'm going to say UI application dot shared application dot status bar style. So this should be equal to UI status bar style dot light content. Alright, so I made a mistake here. This was supposed to be status bar style. So this is basically all that we need to do. So to confirm that everything works appropriately, just the way that we have it in our mind, so I'm going to go ahead and run our application for the last time, hopefully. So as you can see, this is today's date, 31st of October 2019, and as you can see, our status bar is now white color. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and click on next. Click 1 time, this is wrong, so we need to fix that eventually. Click 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, and all. So congratulations guys, you've been able to make your first iOS application in just few minutes using Xamarin.iOS. So I really suggest that you stay tuned to this channel because I'm going to be dropping more videos that's going to help you understand how to make iOS app much more better. So to be able to be part of this great movement, ensure that you hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notification so that you can always get notified whenever I make this kind of video. And if you really like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Like, you need to really give it a thumbs up. So this is it guys, I really love you and thank you very much for watching, and catch you later.